It's always special to be at an event with people who come out. I know how hard it is for myself personally on a weeknight to be here, and it's an amazing thing when people come because they want to hear all about the yeshiva. That's really why everyone came. But while you're here already, so talk a little bit about parenting also. Well, not parenting per se, but parenting in the sense of trying to help our children. I'm not feeling well either, but I didn't have somebody come in my place. You could tell Adam I said that. First, I just want to discuss for a few minutes what I am not talking about tonight, because it's a very, very, very important point. I had a student, not in this school, of course, things like this never happen, but a student came to me recently, and he said to me, names are changed, he said, "David is bullying me. He blew on my ear and he said I have no friends." So I said, "You mean David is bothering you?" He said, "No, he's bullying me." I said, "No, you said he blew on your ear and said you have no friends." So he said, "Yeah, he's bullying me." Or a girl comes home and says, "I got bullied on the bus. Somebody pushed me out of my seat." Why is that an important point? The difference between teasing and bullying. Because, and it's not a simple point. It's a very important point. Our goal in parenting always is future-oriented, long-term. We want to be able to instill in our children, we want to prepare them for the real world. As Jim Fay says from Love and Logic, he says, we want our children to walk out into the real world one day, Be'ez Hashem, and say, I recognize this world. We prepared for this world at home. So as much as possible, we want to give the reins over to our children. We want our children to try to take care of their own problems. If there is a genuine bullying issue, which I do not mean to minimize in the slightest, and when there is such issues, which Baruch Hashem here are very, very minimal, but when there are such issues, many times we as parents and teachers and educators, we have to step in, which is always very difficult, because many times when you step in, the situation just goes underground and becomes much more difficult to deal with and to pinpoint. But nonetheless, we have to do everything in our power because we have to come in and step in because we can't allow it to happen. But the goal is, as much as possible, we want our children to deal with issues. And if it's not a quote-unquote bullying issue, then we want to give it back to them and say, we're your coaches, we're your guides, we're going to be here for you. We have to give you the time, which is not always easy for us, especially when we're tired at night and we're hearing this whole long story. But we want to be able to tell them, so what are you going to do about it? Here's some ideas. And to give the problem back to them, so to speak. Because what happens when they're 35, 40, 45 years old, and somebody in the office makes a nasty comment to them about their shoes or about their ears? And they go stomping into the boss's office and say, I demand that person gets penalized. It's not going to work out very well. I often actually will ask children that. What do you think your father or your mother would do if someone said it to them in the office? So again, if it's a bullying situation, and bullying means, and I'm not getting into everything about bullying, but basically bullying it's consistent, it's humiliation. That's probably the biggest piece of it, that it's done in front of others. If it's done in private, depending what it is, not saying someone's taking away someone's snack or something, but if someone's calling someone names and it's being done in private, I wouldn't usually classify that as bullying. But these are teasing situations, and teasing, unfortunately, is part of life. Some of it is good-natured ribbing. We all do it to each other. It's definitely part of American society. It's what half of comedy is about. But regular teasing is something that we need to learn how to deal with. So that's why this point is so important. And tonight I am not talking about bullying. It's its own topic unto itself. And God forbid, when there are situations like that, we need to try to deal with it as much as possible. And usually just, by the way, the one thing that they say about bullying, the way to target is to target the audience. Because a bully uses crowds of people to put someone down, to make someone feel, very low. We need the main way to deal with it is to take away the crowd. But again, that's a talk for a different time. But I just wanted to point out in opening that we're talking tonight about teasing. And I'm not even talking about good-natured ribbing. I'm talking about teasing, which could be insulting, could be hurtful, could be embarrassing, could be uncomfortable. Not humiliating, embarrassing, like, stuff that kids do to each other. It's not okay, but it happens. It's part of life. So what can we do? How can we help our children? Because, and again, just to emphasize this point one more time, if it's teasing, and it's something that our child, with ideas and some things that we're going to talk about, we can give them some tools that they can deal with, and we step in and we call the school and we say, you have an anti-bullying policy, my son is getting bullied. What are you doing about it? So, first of all, we a little bit bucked the responsibility, but also we're taking away from our children an opportunity to learn about life and to deal with the situation. So it's a very important point. And again, not minimizing bullying and not minimizing the importance of dealing with it, but many times we need to know the difference, whether it is bullying or whether it's teasing. So we're talking tonight about teasing. Not how to do it, that I don't think anybody needs lessons, but how to help our children. Why do kids tease? And the question is, why do adults tease? Why does anybody tease? So I ask kids sometimes, many times kids will be able to understand this, I ask children, who gets teased more? So you see some kids, and they're targets. There's like a target sign on them that says, tease me. What is that target sign? What is the one thing, in one word, if I had to say in one word, what does anybody want when they tease someone else? Reaction. They want a reaction. So you have one kid who walks into school, or he's standing around, and some kid says to him, oh, you got braces, train tracks, and he goes, yeah. Okay. Then you have another kid who walks in, he gets braces, and he goes, oh, train tracks, and he blows a gasket, and he starts flipping out, and he starts yelling, you had that. So the kid immediately in his head says, ding, ding. Here, if I want some easy thrill or easy fun, if I'm a little bored during my day, that's my guy. I often would tell kids, there was one kid in a different yeshiva that I worked in. He was like the paradigm of how to not get bullied. And he was an eccentric kid. He was the type of, kids who are a little bit eccentric, they have their idiosyncrasies, those are the kids that get teased more. This was a kid that should have gotten, but he hardly ever got teased. Because, and maybe it was a little bit part of his, I don't want to say offness, but his, a kid would say to him, again, name made up, Savvy, you're such a loser. And he would go, okay. Or something, you have no friends. No, you too. Just like that. I kid you not. This kid was like, and it was amazing. He was a good kid. He had friends, but he was a little bit socially awkward. But you wouldn't get anything out of it. There was no reaction. And I would often use him when he was still in the school to other kids and say, do you see why he doesn't get teased? Because there's no fun in teasing him. He just totally goes blank. There's a story I once read, a great story that helps if you want to explain this idea with kids. It's the story of the pigeons. A fellow is walking by one day and he sees on front lawn, there's a fellow standing there with his hands out, and seeds all over him, and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of pigeons all over eating. So after the pigeons finally, they all leave, he goes over to him and he says, what's all this? He says, my family's been living here for generations. They had a major, major pigeon problem. He said, my great-grandfather tried shooing them away with a broom. He said, it didn't help. He said, my grandfather, he tried swatting them. He tried squirting them with a water gun. It didn't help. He said, my father tried shooting them. It didn't help. He said, so I came up with this brilliant idea. He said, I cover myself in seeds and they all eat and then they all leave and they're gone. The guy says, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. They're going to come back tomorrow. So it's a ridiculous story. But to explain this to a child, sometimes they say, kid teased me and I told him off and I yelled at him and whatever. Yeah, they left because they got what they wanted. They ate from the seeds. They got the reaction. They'll be back tomorrow. They're going to keep coming back. So I used to have a sign in my office. It said, please don't feed the pigeons. It was particularly for a few boys that I used to bring into my office. That one kid especially had a very hard time with this teasing stuff. He was the classic target, and he had a very hard time. He really had a very hard time with it. But I had the sign. I was just appointed. Sometimes I used to give him little pieces of paper to put on his desk before he goes out to recess to read it. Please don't feed the pigeons. Because I used to tell him, and he used to come in sometimes to my office. He would say, I fed the pigeons today during recess. Telling kids what we often do, what we usually tell kids, sometimes we tell kids, just ignore it. Essentially, theoretically, that's not bad advice. That is the real advice. That is the truth. If you ignore it, usually, again, we're not talking about bullying, we're talking about teasing, we're talking about nasty comments, talking about this type of stuff. Normally, if a kid is able to ignore it, then it'll stop. But it's not always so easy just to say just ignore it, because some kids really can't. So hopefully with some of the ideas that we're talking about, and they need the chizuk, they need the coaching, that's what we are as the parents, to coach them through it. Again, not just to step in, as much as we're able to, Again, if we need to call the school and we need to get involved with teachers, by all means. But as much as possible, if we're able to take a step back, and it's hard for us, it's very hard for us as parents. We don't want to see someone teasing my kid. But if I can get my child to deal with it on his or her own, I'm giving them tools for the future, forever, to make them into a better person. So to say just ignore it, we can try that. We can tell them to try to just ignore it, but we need to keep in touch with them. Did that help? Is it still a problem? I used to have this kid, I used to have him rehearse it in his mind. Because I often will ask kids who get teased. This is a very important point, actually. Do you think the kids who tease you hate you? And usually, if a kid who gets teased a lot will say, yeah, for sure they hate me. They're always being mean to me, always saying not nice things. And then I'll ask, and sometimes in front of the boy, the quote-unquote victim, the boy, the teased, I'll ask the kids, do you dislike this kid? Do you dislike him? It's like, no. Why do you tease him? Oh. But sometimes you'll have a kid who will actually say, oh, it's just funny. He gets crazy. He goes crazy. So I just So telling kids, so I used to tell this kid to say in his mind, to repeat this, and I used to practice it with him. It's only a game I don't want to lose. Because usually that's what teasing is about. It's a game. It's a game. The kids, they're bored, and we'll get to in a second another big part of teasing. But I used to have him rehearse it in his mind. When a kid says something to him, and he's ready to lose it, and ready to blow, and ready to say something that's going to bring back the pigeons, feed the pigeons, it's only a game I don't want to lose. And I used to practice that with him. And sometimes it helped. Why does teasing happen? So I have a bulletin board outside my office, over here, down the hall. And the fourth grade has the distinction of being there right outside my office. And in the mornings, before they get to come into class, they sit there reading. I try to change it every now and then because the poor kids, they read the same thing over and over every day. But I have a sign up there, which is really a classic idea. And actually, one of the fourth graders asked me, I go in on Wednesdays, I have a conflict resolution group with the fourth grade boys and then the girls. So one of the boys asked me, what does this sign mean? It makes no sense. I said, perfect. And we spoke about this idea. The sign reads, hurt people. So if you just read it, it's like somebody messed up over here. But it's a very poignant idea. Hurt people, meaning, as an adjective, people who are hurt. Verb, hurt people. At a person's chasana, at a person's bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, a person's very happy. A person's in a good mood. Usually you're not going to tease other people. You're not going to say mean comments to other people because you feel good about yourself. When do we say not nice things about other people? We know it about ourselves. When are we negative? When are we down? Hurt people. So why is this such an important idea? And I explained this, and I went through this with the students for two reasons. Number one, if I hurt someone else's feelings, and we'll get more into this in a second, but if I hurt someone else's feelings, really the question I need to ask myself is, what's going on with me? Why do I need to say that to somebody else? Why do I need to say a not nice comment to somebody? And again, I'm not talking about the fact that sometimes we make mistakes and we hurt people's feelings by mistake. I'm talking about when we say a mean comment. And the more important point is, when someone says a not nice comment to me, if I'm really healthy, then instead of getting all insulted and saying to myself, oh, you say that about me, why did she say that about me? What really I should think to myself is, I feel bad for them, I wonder why they're having a hard day. That's a really healthy way to look at it. There's one of the greatest books about teasing, again, about now how to deal with teasing, not how to do it, is a book by a woman named Sally Ogden. She's fantastic. She has a few CDs called No Thanks, I Just Had a Banana. That's the title of the CD series. But the book is called Words Will Never Hurt Me. And she talks about a concept called leveling and why teasing happens. Leveling. Said, if think about this for a second. Don't call out the answer, keep it to yourself. If you have between 1 and 10, 10 being the most, the most personable, the most social, the most integrated person, from 1 to 10, picture in your mind where you would rate yourself. Now rate your best friend, or one of your best friends. Pick someone that you feel very close to and rate them also. Now rate somebody that you don't exactly care for, that you don't like being around, someone who's usually around that you don't like being around, rate them as well. She says, your best friend, she says, I've done this with thousands of people, with hundreds of people, probably in the thousands. She said, your best friend is generally 1 or 2 points off from you. The person you don't like is usually between 3 and 6 points off from you. So we like to be around people who make us feel comfortable. They're basically somewhere on the same wavelength as us. So what if we're around someone who's way above or someone who's way below? Especially someone who's way above, where we feel threatened, we feel uncomfortable. We want to level the playing field. How do we do that? What's the easiest way? So I can build myself. That's hard. There's a much easier way. Putting another guy down is the quickest way to level scores, to feel comfortable again. The easiest way to level your score, is to bring down the other person. A put down, a not nice comment is the easiest way. She herself says, Sally Ogden, she says, I was teacher of the year one year. I was very surprised, I was very honored, And she said, all of a sudden, she started, from some people, she got congratulations, that's great, that's wonderful. From other teachers, she started getting not snide comments, but critiques, oh, that's really nice. But, I always say what you do with your students on that Tuesday thing, I don't know. And she would get all these different types of, all these mussars, all these rebukes about things. And she said, at first she was very hurt about it. What's going on? What? Until she realized, hurt people. They feel uncomfortable. They feel like got pushed up the level. They got to level it out. So you put someone down, you say a not nice comment, you say a mean or stinging comment, you bring someone else's level down. I once saw a magnet. It said, Lord, if you won't make me skinny, please make all my friends fat. And I'll give you another example. I don't know about all the wonderful people here, but sometimes you go to a chasana, and it's a very upscale chasana. Very, very beautiful. A lot of money went into the ice sculptures and whatever else that's there. And we sit there at the table and we say, I don't know, so many aniyim in the world. So many people that could have used this. I could have used the money to go to Florida, and they had to make an ice sculpture at the chasana. Why are we doing that? Are we so altruistic that we're just so suffering for the poor people that could have used the money? Or is it more that we're trying to level the playing field? That we feel uncomfortable because this person has a lot of money and Baruch Hu benched them and they should use it well. My favorite is, and we all do this, is that afterwards we feel bad because we just trashed the person, especially we're sitting at their simcha, so we say, he gives a lot of tzedakah. So we make ourselves feel better because, I think that's leveling, that's pulling ourselves up, Or I remember as when I was younger, I remember once going to a beautiful house, stunning house. We had a neighbor, and they, I guess he did well, and they built a beautiful house. And I remember as young, one of the children was showing us around the house, and I kept making these little comments, and I was joking around, and my father said to me, it's not nice. I realize now that it was probably the same thing. It's a feeling of trying to level a little bit because you feel uncomfortable. By the way, also on the other side, sometimes when we have something, sometimes we feel guilty about it. So a person fixes up a house, buys a new house, gets a new car or something, and we're showing it to someone. And as we're showing it, they're saying it's so beautiful, so beautiful. And we're saying, this is no good and that's no good. Because also we can't take a compliment and we feel guilty, maybe we don't deserve it. Which is also something to think about. Because Baruch Hu gave us something we don't have to say. It also doesn't, if you've been on the other side, you know what that's like. Just, why are you saying that for? Why are you telling me all the flaws about it? Dr. Wayne Dyer, famous educator, he says, when we criticize others, we don't define them, we define ourselves. And Chazal said it long ago, that when we see in other people, when we notice flaws in other people, we notice the things in ourselves, and that's why we notice it in other people. She calls it their deep, dark secret. She says, she sometimes has this exercise, Sally Ogden, she says with her students, she says, what's their deep, dark secret? And I'll give you a few examples that she gives, because this is very powerful. She says, it's like a little bit of a chart here. Mean behavior, what the person wants you to believe, and what may be, we don't know for sure, what may be their deep, dark secret. So, big brother hitting a little sister is a situation. He wants her to believe, I'm strong, I'm masculine, macho. What may be his deep, dark secret? I'm scared, I'm not tough, I may be perceived as weak. Teacher yelling at class for doing poorly on a test. Again, not in Ashar, it doesn't happen, but it could happen in other schools. Teacher yelling at a class for doing poorly on a test. She wants, or he wants, the students to believe it's the kids' fault, they're lazy, they're irresponsible, they don't care. What really might be happening, the deep dark secret is, I didn't teach this well enough, I couldn't reach my students on this, I feel inadequate as a teacher. Eighth graders acting stuck up, being mean to other kids, or ignoring them. They want to give the impression, they're cool, popular, happening, we know what's going on. And their deep dark secret may be, I have to act this way so no one sees what's really going on within me. I'm afraid I'm inadequate. I have to act cool to convince people that I really am. boss yells, the last case for here, boss yells at his employee for not selling enough products. The boss wants the employees to believe it's the employee's fault. They should be working harder. And really, the deep, dark secret inside is, I'm afraid the product isn't good enough, or that I'm not managing the business in an effective way. So, of course, we want to help kids try to understand this, which is a goal in life, to help kids, ourselves, to see things from another vantage point. But we also want to train kids, don't tell that to the other person. Don't tell the other person, gee, I wonder what's bothering you today. Maybe your mother yelled at you before you came to school, and that's why you're saying that nice thing to me. No, we don't want that either. But we want the child to think that in their mind. I had this once, in one of my good moments, early on in my vast and long and rich rabbinical career. So somebody down in my shul asked me to come to his house, which was a big mistake that I learned. Don't do that. Never to go to a congregant's house when they call you over because they need to talk to you about some stuff. And he was really criticizing a lot of different things. And as he was talking to me, I realized some of the points didn't make sense. Some of them might have had a little, but like most of it didn't make sense. And then he said to me something about, I was also in charge of a shul at one point, or whatever. You don't know who it is, just by the way. Keep myself, protected here. I know you weren't, but I'm just saying. But anyway, so I realized it like pretty clearly that it wasn't about me. He felt the need, for whatever reason, he felt the need to, like this young rabbi, he has to give, tell him over and tell him what he's doing wrong. Once I realized that, it was so easy for me, so much easier for me to listen. It was just, I just realized it's not about me. I was just like, oh, okay, fine, because I was really able to be makir, and I can't tell you I'm always, that good, but it was clear to me. It was clear to me, like, this is not about me. He needs to be saying these things to me. He needs to feel like he's, whatever it was. So this is an important point. We had a story here once, here in Ashar. There was the groups in art, and also before you. See, who am I not nailing tonight? Oh my gosh! Actually, no, this was a few years ago, and there was one boy who was working on something, and two or three other boys wanted to join his group, and his group was ready. A few kids, he didn't want them to join, so he said, "No, you can't join. You can't join my group." So they started poking fun at him. A minute later, they started saying, "Oh, your project is stinky, and it's garbage, and it's terrible," and whatever else they said. And this kid is a little bit of a hothead, and he got very frustrated, and he got very angry. I don't know if you remember this, and he crumpled up the whole thing, and he threw it in the garbage. And it became a whole to-do. So much so that I had to go to the guidance counselor. So I spoke to both of them together, and I asked them, I said, Aryeh, what happened? He told me my project was garbage, and he told me it was stupid and whatever else. So I said to the other boy, I said, tell me, Chaim, did you really think his project was garbage? So he looks down and he's like, no. I was like, so why'd you say it? It's because he didn't let me be part of the group. And the other kid was so busy, like, it's not right. He was so, I said, wait, stop. Did you hear what he said? And it took him to listen to what the other boy said. No, I didn't think it was bad. I was saying it because you didn't let me be part of your group. And to this kid, it was like an einfall. It was like such an insight. But that's what happens. Why was he saying all those not nice things? Why was he hurting his feelings? Because he was hurt. He was upset. So to be able to convey this to kids, to try to understand this dynamic, that what is in it the other person that they're upset about. And you also have to deal with, a lot of times, you have to know our children, and usually we can recognize this. Some kids just don't get it. Sometimes kids are just really just living, just joking around. And some kids are very literal and very black and white. I had this also had to deal with another kid. They don't get it, and we have to explain it to them. It's hard to explain because things that we grasp by osmosis, those kids who don't grasp the jokiness, will get very angry. So we have to be able to explain that to them too, to try to explain it as much as possible. So a few ideas, I guess, about what kids could do, we could do, if someone teases us. So one idea is to just agree. Someone says, like, oh, your shirt is so funny. Like, oh, okay. To use this approach of this kid that I mentioned at the beginning. Some kids, again, not all these will work for every kid. It depends on the kid. Some kids can make a joke out of it. So someone says to a kid, like, why, your sneakers are like pink. They're the ugliest thing in the world. And he's like, my sneakers? You should see my hats. Some kids could do that. Some kids can't. There was one kid, I don't even remember what it was. I just remember that I was telling him about this idea, and he was all into it. And he used to use the same line over and over because he was very literal. But he was very excited about making a joke out of it. So finally I told him, like, let's try something else. A neutral response. Again, similar to what this other boy that I was telling you before. Thanks for telling me. Good to know how you see it. And not to come across as like me, just to say oh, sorry you feel that way. Okay. I have a friend, a younger friend, who does this thing. It's quite annoying, actually, but he goes, really? Just like that? Really? So if a kid can do something like that and just walk away and just not make a big deal out of it, fighting back, usually just exacerbates the situation. Again, it's feeding the pigeons. That's why it doesn't work, usually, because that's what they want. They want a reaction. It's worth it for a younger sibling. For a younger sibling, I once read this somewhere, and anyone's younger sibling, you probably know this to be true yourself. For a younger sibling, it's worth the beating from your older brother or sister to see them when they get in trouble from your parents afterwards, or with your own children, if you know it. It's worth it. They'll take the beating because afterwards they're going to get in trouble, and then they can look at the parent yelling at the kid afterwards. So fighting back usually just exacerbates the situation. As much as possible to be able to recognize why it happens. And again, we don't know why the other kid is doing it, but to try to convey to our children that when people are mean to you, it's something in them. And that's a very healthy way of looking at it. Sometimes a person could just agree with the criticism. Like, your hair is so weird. I know. Just put a block and just let it go and just not be bothered by it. So I guess 4 steps to dealing with teasing. 1, perspective. Hurt people. To convey this idea, to be able to help our children. And it's a conversation that probably takes more than once. Some kids it may take many times. Some kids, every time something comes up, to discuss this with them again. Once you explain this concept once, it's much easier to rehash it. Number 2 is an important idea also. If a kid has something funny, and it's very painful for us. A kid has funny ears, or a kid has a big nose, or a kid has, we're all Jews, I guess we don't. No, but if someone has something funny, about them, to teach them to accept it. People say mean comments to you, Sometimes kids will tease them and say things that are not even true. So a kid will tease someone and say, you're a loser, you have no friends. So I'll ask them, do you have friends? Yes, I have friends. Who are your friends? Listen to your friends. So what do you care about the other person saying? Because it's mean. Let it go. Let's say it's true. Let's say he made fun of my ears. As much as possible, tell our kids, your ears are a little bit big? Okay. To be able to accept yourself for who you are, with all of your milas, with all of your good qualities. A famous line from Rabbi Yerucham, the Mashgiach in the mirror, he said, woe is to a person, oy on the person that doesn't know their deficiencies, and oy vey on the person that doesn't know their milas, their good qualities. It's always something constant. We need to help build our children to be able to accept themselves. We all have things that could be a little bit funny. We all have things. Nobody is perfect. Everybody has things that people can make fun of. Those concepts are not just like trite and whatever. They're good things to remind and to discuss. Don't defend. Don't prove. It's not true, especially with rumors and these types of things, which is a discussion unto itself. You sit there defending, then you're feeding into it. That's what they want. They want a reaction. So when you're screaming and yelling at it, it's not true, it's a lie, is feeding into it. And that's a mistake. And as much as possible to try to be a lousy future target. The going neutral, if you can make a joke out of it, to be a lousy future target. Especially with younger children, I think all of this Torah might be too much. As much as possible, you want to give assertiveness training. To give them the ability, especially with younger children, to practice it with them, to say to a kid who's bothering them, you can't do that. Or I statements are a very important thing. When you do that to me, it hurts my feelings, or it makes me upset. But to be able to look at a kid in the face, and this takes a certain amount of training, but with young kids, a lot of times a kid will prey, P-R-E-Y, on a younger, easier target, to be able to give the kid the strength and to practice with them, to be able to say to the child, you can't do that. And of course, if that doesn't work, then go to the Mora, or to whoever. But the first thing is, as much as possible, if we can give the child the ability to deal with it on their own, it gives them a sense of self-esteem, and it's a tool for the future. And I'll end with a great quote, which is always a good thing to remind. Don't act as small as the other guy feels. don't act as small as the other guy feels. And Kadosh Baruch Hu should give us all nachas from our children, the nachas from ourselves, and to be the patience to deal with all the situations that come up. Thank you very much for listening.